the TTS Talking Early Years podcast. Each week we'll be joined by educational experts from across the globe, offering exclusive insights, inspiration and guidance to help practitioners unlock the potential for learning in the early years. To hear about future episodes and access follow-up content, including ideas for your settings and more, sign up for exclusive access using the link in the podcast description. Welcome to our fourth little focus on developing luscious language. According to the research, the children we play with every day, Olivia, every day these children have spent more time now in virtual reality than in reality in the first 5 years of their lives. So any child born after 2010 has had more time in virtual reality than in reality. Oh my goodness. That then means that we need to not meet them in virtual reality, thank the Lord, but we need to compete with it slightly. So resources that are full of possibilities, irresistible learning possibilities that capture their attention and interest are vital. So, Olivia, inspire us. What can we do? What can we do?
So, resources. This is a really big part of my practice and something I'm even more passionate about now that I work at TTS and I have the privilege to watch these resources be created and implemented. And like you said, tech time. For our children, they watch a screen continuously. And how do we compete with the screen when there are so many engaging things happening on their iPad? And it's about making those quality resources and implementing them so that they can interact, they're excited, they're engaged, and making sure they're cross-curricular. I think that's a really key part here is actually, if you need to transform your environment and looking at current climates and budgets, it's difficult to refresh a whole setting. It really is. So picking those one or two key items that can be cross-curricular and can move between all areas and really engage those children is really important. And the practitioners should be excited about the resources as well. Like you said in one of the previous episodes, when you were getting new resource in, that bouncing back and forth ideas between practitioners and how to implement it is really important, because if we're excited, the children are going to be excited.
Hugely. And I guess, I'm as excited as you, Olivia. I love a resource as well. I'm the resource queen. And I love a spoon and a mash and a stick and a stone. And you're absolutely right. It's about key changes. Continuous provision is there, and enhanced and enriched provision is a must, especially because we are competing with this new world that we're living in, I guess. And so the staff need to take responsibility and ownership of that. And they need to look at how they are in making the construction a bit more exciting today, or to look at the sensory area and say, well, actually, we need to mash that up a wee bit. What is it we can do in these spaces that we share to encourage open-ended resources to have these infinite possibilities? So I guess, what could you do in the book corner, Olivia, do you think, to make it more open-ended?
Well, I think refreshing books continuously. I've been in lots of settings and the same books are out all the time. And we as adults know, how many times can you read the same book and not get bored? And I think it's sort of looking at the cohort of children, following their interests and refreshing those books to keep them engaged, to challenge their comprehension, and making sure that it's cozy and it's warm and it's welcoming. And whether they read independently or whether that's a really lovely one-to-one time with the adult, making sure that books are exciting, I think, is really important. And in the ages that we are now with technology, books aren't as important aspect of children's life than they were 10, 20 years ago. And by focusing on that reading and that book time within settings, we have to do that even more so now than we ever did previously, because reading is not happening as much at home. Statistics have showed us as it was many years ago. So making sure that love of reading and children taking books home as well. I think, putting a book in a book bag and asking the child to read it with their parents, and making sure that reading is fluid between the setting and the home is really important.
I think absolutely right. And the reason I picked books to ask you about there is because it's not really seen as an open-ended resource, but it can be hugely open-ended.
Yes.
And, I can remember buying 2 copies of the books, and we used to take one of them apart, which broke my heart, but I did it for really good purpose, and we put it around the room. And so we had to find page 1 and then page 6 and and it was a completely different reading experience. And so if you think about the hidden learning that came out of reading the book in that way, it was huge. And another thing that we did is we took some of the pages and we traced over the characters in the page, and then we blacked them out, so it was like a shadow of and the children had to then pick a shadow out of the bag and find the page it was on, and then talk about that page. And the other thing you said there, Olivia, about sending it home and having that support system from home is vibrantly important. I would encourage us not to say to any parents, read this with your child, but share it with your child, because we don't know the reading skills of the parents often. And we have a lot of children who have parents who struggle with that. So we change our language with that. But also, we don't send the whole book home sometimes. We would just, again, have maybe 2 or 3 copies of the same book, and we would send just 2 pictures with a couple of things for them to talk about. Yeah. And to make it easier for the conversations to take place, and to make books more open-ended than they were. So I picked books. What do you think is an open-ended resource that is going to have infinite possibilities, Olivia?
Oh, Loose Parts is a favourite of mine. I love loose part play. I just think the children can take it wherever they want to, the imaginations that flow. And it's always amazed me how you can put a cardboard box out with a few little resources. It's a spaceship, it's a race car. It then flows into every area of the continuous provision, and communication and language that flows from that is incredible. And loose parts, adding lots of loose parts, whether these are recycled materials, whether you're out hunting on a weekend, seeing what you can find, what the children can create. I would find, especially the newly qualified practitioners, I used to just stand there with them and say, just watch. Just observe, listen to the communication that the children are having and how they're working out between a team and that peer on peer between the child to create their masterpieces. It's something that's always brought me awe and wonder, watching children play with loose parts.
Hugely. And I guess what we want to happen is learning to take place and thinking to happen from anything that we do. And loose part play or construction materials or anything. And I'm thinking, if you think about 3 bed springs in a box and 3 wooden blocks in a box, and you put 3 lids off of a jar in a box, and you put 3 felt balls in the box, and then you put some blue tack and some sellotape and some ribbon, what learning can come out of that is just huge. So sometimes I feel open-ended resources scare practitioners, that we're not really sure what our role is in playing with loose parts. And so do you think there's a bit of training or learning that needs to be happening with our practitioners, Olivia, to encourage us to be more confident with open-ended resources?
Yes, I do think so. And I think, as you said, practitioners, what is our role in this? How do we, sometimes our role is not having a role. Sometimes our role is just providing the materials and the resources and letting the children take the lead. And I think sometimes that's something that practitioners are cautious about, is actually it's okay just to stand back, watch how the children interact and watch what they're starting to build, and then come into the play. Ask those key questions, what's going to happen next? And, how is this play going to create? If it's a race car, where's the race car going to? Where are you? How fast is it going to go? You can add so much new language into that play, but letting the children lead it. And I think that's what practitioners need to think. It's okay sometimes to step back and let the children lead.
Yeah, absolutely. And knowing when to step in and when to step away from the play is the challenge, isn't it? And there isn't a right and wrong answer, but research, I guess, and reading other people's ideas around it would be, so if you look at Julie Fisher, she has a book called Interaction versus Interfering, or Vivian Gusson-Paley, and her technique of helicopter stories would encourage us to allow us to walk back, step away from the loose parts or the open-ended resources, but allow us to then come back into it and structure it and replay it and for the children to review and reflect on their own engagement. And I think as practitioners, as early years professionals, we maybe don't take enough time to do a bit of extra reading. You know, I've been 30 years in the sector, 32 in fact, and I read all the time because there's always something new to find out. So, you know, is there something that you would signpost to our listeners, Olivia, that would encourage them to think more openly about open-ended resources?
Well, I think we're lifelong learners, aren't we? And like I said in one of our previous episodes, I learn something new every day when I'm working with children. And I think you have to focus on it's reviewing the gaps that are in your provision or reviewing the gaps in interaction. There's so much material and there are so many books and there is so much research and information on the early years sector. Sometimes it can be overwhelming for us as adults. So I think it's reviewing a certain area within your provision or having that team chat and say, actually, we're lacking interaction here, or I think, and then reviewing the material that should be put in place, because there are so many books, there are podcasts, there are webinars, there's so many places you can go for that additional professional development, that instead of practitioners being overwhelmed, I think it sits with the senior leaders and managers to have that team collaboration and then say, here's an area that's lacking. Can you all go and find me a really good article about it? And then let's review that in the next team meeting, because with the best will in the world, when you've worked 10 hours in a nursery, practitioners don't want to go home and read all evening. So I think giving those key tasks and saying, this is an area I want to focus on for the next 3 weeks. Can all of you go back and come back to me or on a WhatsApp group message or in the next team meeting, however you collaborate and communicate with your team, and just asking them to pick out one key article or something interesting that they've read. And with social media, you know, tech is such a big aspect of our lives, and actually from being a part of Facebook groups in early years or following certain Instagram people, you can get so much inspiration and interesting material from those sources. And I think just having an open line of communication between all.
And I think that's a really strong message there, Olivia, that we're not on our own. You know, even if you are a lone worker, you know, maybe there's some childminders listening, or you're in a little tiny nursery setting where there's only one or two of you in the room. And the reality is that there is a whole world of possibilities out there if you want to and need to look for inspiration to help you replant a little thought seed, if you like, certainly on the materials we use for play. And, you know, and the other thing I think that we need to encourage our listeners to think more about is that we can plan and we can plan and we can plan, but actually we need to be organic and flexible in the way we approach things, because children have loads more ideas than us. Yes. You know, when we're working in the sector, Olivia, the planning, how much effort and energy went into it, but actually were staff courageous enough to say, well, I'm just not going to do that plan today?
Well, I think it's changed over the years, hasn't it? I remember when I was first managing, it was all about planning. Ofsted wanted to see your plans. They wanted to see, and it would take so much effort to plan. And like you said, nothing would ever go to that plan. It's about being flexible, and then staff would spend so long making these beautiful plans, and the impact that they thought it would make in children would just not follow it, and they would make their own way. And actually, the last few years since Ofsted and the EYFS reforms have come into place, and it's more about less paperwork and more interaction and more observation, it's been really refreshing to see practitioners change their mindset on that point.
Being courageous, though, and bold to also say, I am not there yet as a practitioner. I am not skilled enough to do in the moment planning, or I'm not skilled enough to, I need a plan. I need to have a little something written down that makes me feel more confident, because I think that there's a lot of young practitioners who have trained during a time that was not normal, and they therefore don't have the breadth of knowledge perhaps that they should, and so they need a bit more time to be a bit more structured in the way that they approach the play and not be judged for that.
And And I think that's the important thing. It's that team approach, isn't it? It's knowing who in your team requires that support and whether they need to have a few key things written down or the next steps or what they're trying to get out of the activity they're putting in place, or whether that's just the senior leaders stepping in and saying, hey, that's okay. Let's have a discussion about this.
Yeah, because I think certainly I have revisited scaffolding as a technique and sustained shared thinking as a technique because the children I'm playing with now are very different.
Yes.
They come to the play very differently than they did 3 years ago, certainly. And therefore I have to revisit those techniques in order to be confident again with open-ended resources. And so, wow. I mean, just wow. I feel that we've covered a massive amount of content, but we have said loads, we've not said very little. We could go on for hours, Olivia. And again, thank you so much for your insights, your ideas, and your inspirations. We hope, I guess, Olivia and I, that we've planted little seeds, guys, for you all. And it's now over to you to water them and to make them grow. Oh my goodness. So I guess we'll round off our little experiences here, guys, our little conversations. I'd like to say, first of all, a huge, massive thank you to Olivia, our guest, for joining us and providing us such valuable insights into your past and your current roles, Olivia, which are very different. So that's fab.
Yes, very different.
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us. You've been listening to the TTS Talking Early Years podcast with me, Alice Sharp, and Olivia Kirkby from TTS. If you have been inspired by our conversation today, don't forget to sign up, guys, via the link in our episode notes to be the first to hear about future episodes and access exclusive follow-up content, including ideas for your settings or Pinterest boards, to shop for resources relevant to the topics that we've discussed throughout our conversations. This podcast episode, oh my goodness, has been fabulous. So get your ears ready for the next one.
Thank you.
I'd like to say, first of all, a huge, massive thank you to Olivia, our guest, for joining us and providing us such valuable insights into your past and your current roles, Olivia, which are very different. So that's fab.
Yes, very different.
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us. You've been listening to the TTS Talking Early Years podcast with me, Alice Sharp, and Olivia Kirkby from TTS. If you have been inspired by our conversation today, don't forget to sign up, guys, via the link in our episode notes to be the first to hear about future episodes and access exclusive follow-up content, including ideas for your settings or Pinterest boards, to shop for resources relevant to the topics that we've discussed throughout our conversations.